Good evening.
Here is the truth. I spent 32 years in Britain's living rooms delivering the bad news
Whose lives are rotting away every bit as quickly as the wreckage of the boats that brought them here.
and the good.
And finally, goodbye.
At all times, whether it was on ITN or the BBC, what mattered most was that we delivered truthful and accurate bulletins based on fact.
I am asking him the question, not anyone else.
All were important stories that needed to be told truthfully and with context. The Oxford Dictionary defines truth as something which depends on a person's perspective and experience. It defines the word fact as something that cannot be combated with reasoning, for it is logic itself.
The truth is very boring. Conspiracy theories and fake news stories are much more interesting and exciting.
I know fake news has just caught the imagination of young and old alike.
Some people have used the term fake news to mean anything that they disagree with.
It's become such an everyday vocabulary now.
Fake news, in an odd sort of way, has highlighted the concern that people can essentially say something, publish something online, and it sort of has a validity because it's out there.
They want to hear information that fits with their own opinions. They want to be part of their own echo chamber.
They don't know the difference between a report on the BBC or something that comes up on their Facebook feed. It's all the same. They give it the same relevance.
The future, of course, lies with our children. And these days, they're more likely to get their news from social media on their smartphones and tablets. A recent report from Ofcom found that social media blurs the news for most people. They did a survey which found that 3/4 of their sample read the news on their phones and had heard of fake news, but did not know what the term meant. This Cambridgeshire village primary school is one of a number in the UK where the teachers are trying to educate children about the media in general and social media in particular.
So if you think back to last week's lesson, we thought about truth, we thought about what it means and how it was important to our society. Can you, for me, chat to the people on your table? What does truth mean? Why is it important to our society? Refresh your memories. Have a go, 5 seconds. Well, I thought it's one of those things that's actually really important to talk to them about, because there's so much in the media at the moment about fake news, and it's really filtered down into their lives. So I think it's really important to be able to teach them how to identify it, how to distinguish between what's real and what's not. So any ideas then? What does the word truth mean, first of all?
Truth is basically, if you don't tell the truth, no one will know what's happening.
Is truth important in our society, do you think?
Yes, because if there was no truth, everybody would lose trust in everybody else, and then it would be and then society would break down.
We explored truth as part of that lesson, and lots of that the children became very involved with understanding how truth creates respect, and respecting each other is really important.
Some things like fake news are kind of obvious, so if someone said like there's been a unicorn in France or something, it'd be kind of obvious, but if like some things you might not be able to find out, some things you'd think were true.
I think it's really important for them to be able to identify and know how to check whether news is fake or whether it's real, and they should be able to find reliable sources of information and news from that. How would you be able to check whether something is fake news or real news?
You could go on to like another source of news. So if you found that out in like the newspaper, you could go on to like the TV and find out if it's true, or search it up or something.
The pupils were very engaged with this topic, and lots of our children, I think, through social media have an understanding that maybe everything they read is not necessarily the truth.
I think it is more difficult today because the sheer quantity of things that we're bombarded by.
Reputations can be destroyed by inaccurate news stories or false news stories in the blink of an eye.
Truth is in danger.
We've got a big challenge.
If truth isn't a permanently endangered species, then democracy itself is in danger.
And I have to believe that in the end, truth will out.
And that's why the work of Internews is so important, that actually we do what we can to make sure that truth survives and flourishes.
For the past 35 years, Internews has been supporting the truth and those who report it in more than 100 countries, often in the most challenging of environments. This is the London base of the operation, which is reaching more than 50 countries this year alone. Here they coordinate everything from establishing temporary information structures in conflict and disaster zones, training journalists in newly emerging democracies, to turning the lights on in places where there is still information darkness. These days, much work involves teaching literacy so that entire communities have the wherewithal to discern fact from propaganda and opinion.
The purpose of Internews is to support the truth and the people who report it. All around the world now, people often don't know where to turn in telling fact from fiction. The truth is getting buried, deliberately manipulated, and traditionally trusted media is constantly being called into question. What we at Internews say is that we have to reinvest and redouble our efforts in supporting truthful, trusted content from media and content producers in all of their forms, so that there is a rebalancing of the news and information ecosystem.
Sometimes life and death truths lie hidden in plain sight, and it's the role of the media to find them and tell the world.
And Pakistan is a country that we're all too familiar with. It's in the news a lot internationally with, often for the wrong reasons, because of instability, because of terrorism, and because of violence. And that news agenda is one which really prevails in the national news media in Pakistan as well.
In Pakistan, where it was reported that suicide bombers were the nation's biggest cause of death and injury, traffic accidents were in fact a bigger killer.
5 times as many people were dying in road accidents on some of the most dangerous routes in the country as were being killed by terrorist bombs. But there was no government action on this issue because everybody else was talking about instability and conflict.
There was little or no roadside medical, accident and emergency aid to help the injured and dying.
And it was through training local journalists in the use of big data and open data that journalists there were able to get access to the truth.
And Internews helped to expose this truth and encourage Pakistan's National Highway Authority to establish 9 first aid trauma centres on its roads, with more to come. In Eastern Europe and Central Asia, there are many authoritarian regimes that do not allow free speech. Kyrgyzstan sits alongside the ancient trade route between China and the Mediterranean, the Silk Road. Here, the powerful and corrupt keep having to face uncomfortable truths that would expose their misdeeds. So they try to shut down good journalism, often using the nation's judiciary to do it. But help is now at hand. Journalists who find themselves in court have Internews standing alongside them.
We provide experienced lawyers to help journalists to report freely on important public interest issues to make our government be accountable. And here in Kyrgyzstan, we are not afraid to protect journalists. We also make trainings for journalists to talk about rights and responsibilities. Journalists should be more professional in fact-checking, in verification all the information, all the accusations of politicians. And we need to educate journalists to know not only their rights, but also their responsibilities.
One of the other tremendous achievements which we've had in Kyrgyzstan is the creation of a civil society network, a whole group of partners across the country who are dedicated to uncovering cases of corruption, having these reported upon and investigated. And this has led to 100 new cases being opened by public prosecutors in the last 2 years alone.
For too many years, we've all watched the terrible and heart-rending images of desperate people risking life and limb to escape one way of life to find one they believe is better. Many thousands have drowned or nearly drowned as those trying to get away set sail on vessels that are often no more than death traps. In Greece and throughout the Mediterranean, Internews has been working with local media and journalists to get the truth of the extreme danger involved to those who truly matter.
When the migrants crisis started, you have to imagine that you had more or less something around 1,000 or 2,000 people every week arriving on the shore of Greece's island like Lesbos from Turkey. Now, a lot of the people that were arriving there had no idea where they were, like literally they didn't know if they were in Europe, in Greece, and a lot of them had no idea how to get access to any type of service. And so a lot of what we did, especially at the beginning of the crisis, was literally very basic information. We set up posters and we were giving out leaflets directly on the coast when people were arriving to let them know, you're here, you're in Greece. This is how far you are from the rest of Europe. This is a map. This is the organizations that are going to provide you services. This is where you can go to register and so on. We realized that there was a huge gap in terms of what the European Union was deciding about the fate of these refugees and what they thought was their rightful right to travel and to reach certain destinations.
My biggest question was about where should we go to be safe and to be accepted.
People smugglers were often telling people as they set off on the dinghies and the dangerous boats across the Mediterranean that they must sink their boats and dinghies just before they arrived on the shores of Europe so as not to be turned away again.
The smugglers with the gun, with the knife, they are telling the people that whether you want to travel or not, this is something that you have to do that.
Now this was just a ruse to protect themselves, but of course it was one of the most toxic and deadly rumours that existed in that whole crisis.
These people are arriving in the night, they are dying in the water. You look out to the water, you will see a mass grave. Nobody knows how many boats go down. They have clothes, with heavy bags, they just go down.
People had been fed a pack of lies about what to expect when they came to Europe, what their rights were going to be, and what was going to happen to them next. And so on the shores of Lesbos, in Greece, and around the Mediterranean rim, we had tens of thousands of people who were acutely vulnerable because they hadn't had access to the truth.
A lot of them told us that they probably would have not started the trip if they knew what was expecting them, not just on the water, but also after they arrived.
When we leave our country, that is not a choice. It's not my choice that I leave my country.